Washington had some depth in the secondary.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's site editor with Athlon Sports' Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thanks for making this your first watch or first listen of the days. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get on the regular season action with FanDuel because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Lars, got a really fun show coming at all the everydayers today. Just a quick reminder though, make sure you hit that subscribe button, like the podcast, leave us a comment down below if you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything like that. If you're audio only, leave us a 5-star review. All those things really do help us out a lot. And that's because we got so much fun stuff that we want to make sure you hear about. Where, Lars, we got to talk about the big news surrounding Bill Belichick, and Steve Belichick, going to North Carolina, not taking any other coaches with him. That's a great sign. We're going to get there. Talk about this class a little bit. We've got a lot of questions just surrounding what the future of the class might look like in terms of the transfer portal, how many more guys might be added in terms of just where Washington is in scholarships and everything like that, because the Huskies added another player on Sunday, right as we hit stop record on our bonus show, and that's Florida international safety CJ Christian.
Yeah, and a guy that we talked about on the Friday show, I believe, if memory serves me correctly on that one, where he came in for a visit on Friday and actually was told that he was not going to take any more visits. So I kind of was expecting that one to drop either Friday or Saturday, just the way things have lined up. Genesis Smith stays in Arizona.
Right.
Kind of see some other chess pieces start to go in different places. And you're like, oh, I would have thought Washington would have got him. Would have got him. Everything kind of thinking, okay, well, CJ is on campus. And then you find out CJ is going to visit Cal. And then it's like, oh, okay, it changes the equation slightly. Again, you're still odds-on favorite Washington, probably 4.5-point favorites at home in that one. But, anytime you let a kid get off campus, it's okay. Anything can happen until things close on Sunday night, at least until January 1st. Again, it's just a small dead period where can't take any more, after the 28th, can't take any more visits and things like that. But it was one of those where, okay, thinking like, Washington was a school, thinking Washington was a school, and then finally the news drops literally right as I'm like, right when I saw that tweet when you put it up, I'm like, of course. Look at my missed calls, look at my missed texts. I'm like, oh, of course. People, you can't just say like, hey, we're gonna be doing this at 3 p.m. on whatever. It's like, no, never the glamorous part. But again, the reason why I say all this is to say it was worth the wait. It was worth letting him take that last visit to Cal, because now you kind of have two tandem safeties that you can lock in and still roll with Mikal, still sort all those young guys out. Peyton Waters doesn't take a hit in the situation because these are all both. First of all, it's a 1-year guy. It's a 1-year guy. Yeah. At least from everything I've understood. And I mean, I guess unless the JUCO ruling decides to kick in 1 extra year and things like that. But this is kind of another reassuring piece of just production, impact player. I think I said on the Friday show, all badass team, and he really is. But it's just another guy to put next to McLaughlin and really kind of raise up some of those young guys. And as I said, fun fact, former JUCO teammate of Mac McCree. So, kind of all those little stories kind of starting to come full circle now.
So the one thing I'm really glad you mentioned there, where this is a really solid addition in terms of you want a little bit of that veteran leadership, the hard hitting. He brings all those things that you want to the table. And it's one of those things where, people are saying, well, why didn't you go get Genesis Smith, who's much higher rated, who's this, who's that? He had an opportunity. You didn't get him. Dalton Johnson, another Arizona guy who was on campus for a visit. And he also goes back to Arizona. Where I look at CJ Christian, and when you mentioned Peyton Waters, you mentioned Rashawn Clark, Paul Menke, Raheem Wright, Ryland Dillard Allen, you think about all the younger guys in the room and you say, you want to make sure those guys stick around because you've seen Tristan Dunn enter the transfer portal now. You look at just the way that everything has played out at the position, and you want to make sure that you get those young guys into the rotation. As you said, we talked about some of these things on the Friday show, but it's really important to bring them back up and emphasize them, especially when it comes to somebody like Peyton Waters, where you love what he brings to the table so much that you play him in every game on special teams to burn his red shirt. And we barely see him on the field on defense, but we know what kind of ceiling he has. We know that at points in both the spring and the fall, he was running with the first team back there because we saw it. Like we saw that this is how high you are on this guy. And we're going to get to it later when we talk about Vinnie Sunseri, where this also is one of those things where, you can still go to a guy like Braylon Womack in the 2026 class and say, hey, if you want to see the field early, there's not going to be nearly as much in terms of a whole ton of veterans with experience in your way, where, we can talk about, again, Rashawn Clark, Paul Menke, Raheem Wright, where Raheem Wright is a guy that I'm really interested in going forward, where he played a little bit in the nickel early on. He got hurt, didn't really see him for the rest of the season after that. But I look at all these guys and I say, I know that Vinnie Sunseri has a plan for this room with all this talent, with all these young guys to get him into the rotation and rotate him through, where I'm curious to see how this shapes up in terms of numbers at linebacker, because we've seen so many of these guys line up in the box. And that's something that I think CJ Christian can do really, really well, is come downhill and be a force in run support and be a guy where, a lot like Cam Broussard and Cameron Fabiculanen, just make an impact in multiple areas of the game, not just in coverage.
Yeah, absolutely. I think actually his run grade on PFF was slightly better than his coverage grade. And that's not to cite his coverage grade, because he had 5 interceptions over, and 150 tackles. So clearly knows how to read and find the ball. And that's not the question. But I think kind of to answer your point, it's a good problem to have. These are the good questions. These are the questions that you really want to create when you turn over the roster and make these decisions. Is how is he going to fit with this? We're saying he can be on the field no matter what, or we can take him off and put somebody else in a different package or whatever, those sort of things. But this doesn't kind of strike me as a guy who really is going to come off the field. Like there's no reason why he would come off the field. Now he can, and to your point about going down in the box and things like that. But to me, I would rather have that problem, and you can figure that out on the back end of who ends up sorting out. Same thing with Cam Broussard, like you mentioned, where guy comes in, ends up playing a significant amount of snaps, and you just figure out who works best in what packages. I think that seems to be the hallmark of whoever the next DC is going to be. Seems to be okay. Well, we're gonna get all the pieces here, so it's almost like chess, where okay, we can literally leave you up there like a horse, or we can bring you back and kind of do certain things about that. And to me, it kind of, I'm not really worried about how many snaps he'll get or anything like that, because I think Jedd has shown. I think as Jedd has shown, and that's more like that's a logistical problem you can figure out on game day and game day prep, rather than okay, well, let's take this guy because he fits better than what we might think about. Don't overthink. I think that's the good takeaway from this. Is it's a solid evaluation, guy with solid experience, and you look at it and think, okay, yeah, you didn't overthink this evaluation one bit. It's actually kind of reassuring.
So I like where you're going with that. One guy that I didn't mention with the younger safeties in the room was Vincent Holmes, and that's a name that I need to make sure I mention here, because one of the biggest things that we saw with him was, I think back to the Indiana game where they had him as the dime defensive back. There are a couple different situations where he was the guy on the field where, we didn't see a lot of Justin Harrington, the other safety transfer that Washington took this past season. And I think that's worth noting for a couple of reasons. The first one being, if you take a guy and he just flat out gets beat out, or that could have been the story with Harrington, we just didn't hear much about that throughout the season. If he gets beat out, he gets beat out. It's a grad transfer of 1 year of eligibility. You can find a role for that guy on special teams, which is, the other thing I want to make sure we mention here is you can find different ways to make sure all these guys get utilized, where somebody with that kind of experience can be a crucial part of special teams, which was horrendous in coverage all season long. And just finding those extra bodies with experience that can contribute. They might not be the top end guys. And we're not saying, hey, you need to it's okay to miss on a lot of the top end guys. But in this particular situation, this is somebody who fits what Washington needs at the position really, really well. Genesis Smith was going to come in and start and take a whole lot of snaps away from some of the younger players in the room. CJ Christian is not going to do that, and he's going to help continue to bridge the gap to a lot of talent and just exciting athleticism that Washington has on the back end of the defense. And Lars, his commitment does pose a question. How many more transfers can the Huskies take? Which will get you right after a message from our friends over at Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps you lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals that you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. For me, one of the best features is the subscription tracker. I've used it to cancel services I wasn't using anymore, and I have already saved a ton. Plus, with their goals feature, I've been able to automatically set aside money for my future. No more stressing about budgeting every month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockdown today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockdown. Again, rocketmoney.com/lockdown. So, Lars, we've got a lot of questions about, hey, who else can Washington take? We've seen they're up to, I believe 11 is the number now of transfers coming in. We've seen 12 go out so far. So the numbers in terms of balance are somewhat even with guys leaving versus, and a lot of guys have found a new home at this point as well, versus guys coming in. And it still feels like Washington isn't done. Where to me, I see at least 3 or 4 more guys where one receiver, at least 2. I want to make sure we talk about Jordan Dwyer, an offensive lineman, whether it be an interior tackle. There's going to be at least one. I'm feeling we're going to see Washington roll with some of the young guys in the interior. We'll get to that as well. A linebacker feels just certain for one reason or another. And then defensive tackle would be one more, where you got to get one more guy in that room.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't disagree with any of that. I'm more sold on one receiver at this point. I don't necessarily think they're going for 2. I kind of put out some feelers over the weekend when they had guys on campus, and I said, "Do you take both, or is this a one or one of the other situations?" Right, and I never heard back. And I think it was kind of one of those situations of, well, it can kind of go both ways. Well, first of all, part of it's on us, making the pitch, and then the other side of that is, well, then the kid also has to want to commit. And it's not that I don't think the scheme is appealing and wants to commit, but when you don't get Jordan Dwyer, yeah. But yeah, that was a situation where, okay, you're a little bummed out there, and especially you would think, with Yari Alexander, maybe that would have, helped things over as 2 former Idaho guys, but unless, you keep pushing in that respect. That to me is why, Jonte Cook kind of comes, suspect 1A, 1B in that room right there. If they can get him, obviously he went to an official visit to Florida afterwards and got to hang out with DJ Lagway, which to me, I'm like, man, would you rather have DeMond or DJ? Like, I don't know. There's probably some bias up here, but like, I'd rather have DeMond, like, because I can see the coaching staff working out better than I can down in Gainesville.
Yeah, I certainly agree with you there, where the thing with Jordan Dwyer to mention is, especially as a Puyallup guy, that's a big loss, where he goes to TCU, which is kind of shocking considering, he took visits to USC and UW and just the offenses at all 3. I feel like there are certainly other factors at play here where, from everything we were told, Washington was very, very competitive in terms of where the offer was. And we shared a little bit more with our insiders. Shameless plug there. Go check that out. Links down in the description below. We shared a little bit with them, but that's one of those things where that's still, no matter what way you slice it, that's still a very big loss. And you want to make sure you get a guy like that in the room, which do you go up your offer to Jonte Cook now and say, yeah, now we need you more than ever? Something like that. There have been rumors about other guys that Washington is in on, and you still want to make sure you take one guy in that room no matter what, somebody who can stretch the field and really help out, because especially after Keith Reynolds transfers, you just want a veteran at that position, just somebody else with experience, which is why the Giles Jackson redshirt year ended up being so helpful, where all of a sudden that's a guy that Will Rogers can really rely on throughout the season. But we look at the offensive line. I personally think that's going to be an interior guy after losing Wendell Moy to Tennessee. That's another significant loss. I think the Dwyer one hurts a little bit more just from what we heard about, where that situation was in the days leading up to his eventual announcement. But I think an interior guy would be much more important where, if you trust Maximus McCree, Carver Willis, and improve Drew Party in 2025 to help you out a little bit, like I think you can survive, because it's not just them. It's, Justin Hilkema is going to be a little more in the mix, David Boyagi and some of those redshirt freshmen, plus all the guys from the 2025 class as well. I look at the interior and say, you might be able to hide somebody a little bit better in there. If you want to say, hey, John Mills, Peter Lange, Champ Atalialia, any of these guys, do you want to put them in there and just say, yeah, we're, going to mask you a little bit. We can help you out with whoever's at tackle and figure out a way around it. I know they got overpowered, but with this, just in 2024 on the interior at different points in time. But with the size they're bringing in, you can find ways to get by.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the one thing that kind of comes to mind for me is and there hasn't really been, this is kind of more or less just throwing it out there situation, that Ohio State backup left tackle, I think he's like 6'6", 319, 320, somewhere in that ballpark. He's a little bit taller for a tackle, but the first thing that came to mind was, why not just run back the Enoch plan? Like, yeah, he's a left tackle, but say, hey, you know what? We need you a left guard. Like, can you just kick in just a little bit here? And you look at a guy like that where, again, you kind of want that P4 body, but maybe doesn't have all the P4 experience like you want, where Enoch, the reason why I keep mentioning Enoch is it's the same Ohio State guy. You look at it, okay, hasn't really started multiple years, but you have the body and size. And Brendan has shown, he's not afraid to flip guys from tackle to guard to, center. He has no problem interchanging the offensive line. And I would kind of look at it and think it's a low risk, high reward situation there, because if you can get like that size at left guard, I think that helps Max Great. I think that helps Landon Hatchett. I think you just go down the line and that kind of sorts everything like that out. Because otherwise, we haven't really heard like a massive amount of names. And you look at some of the guys in the portal, every time it's, hey, this 3-year starter is going to Texas A&M, and it's like, why, people? Why? What,
right?
What are we doing here?
You're talking about the same way Mikulski from Ohio State. Yeah, that's certainly an interesting name, just with everything that happened with Enoch, and Brendan Carroll did a good job making him look serviceable. He didn't, he wasn't a star by any means, but it wasn't like he was a complete turnstile either. And he was helpful and just helped get by, which is the most important thing there, where if you need somebody to bridge a gap to Pakifi now and play a couple of games before you feel just completely ready to turn the reins over to him, that's one thing. Let's talk about defensive tackle, where, Lars, we've heard Jonah Coleman hinting at Instagram Live about somebody from Wazoo coming over. There's Buda Al-Ukta, like the linebacker, where that's a name we'll get to in a second. But he can also be talking about David Gusta, defensive tackle, where if I were to pick one guy that has entered the portal from that roster, just in terms of what Washington needs, he'd probably be the name that I'd go after, because he's somebody who I feel you could plug in and start right away, and he'd be a disruptive piece of that rotation, not only as a run defender, but in the pass game as well.
Yeah, I think that one, to me, that's why when I put out on Twitter, referencing Jonah's thing, that, yeah, here's the kind of, guys that I would keep in mind for this. And obviously one of them was Tariq. And now when you have Jerry Alexander and all those sorts of things, that kind of makes things a little bit easier. But no, for me, it's go get another 6'3", 6'2", 300-pound D tackle. Just go solve that issue right there. And he's a guy that is a true plug and play. You look at the PFF grades, all check out in terms of tackle and run defense and things like that. And you what was kind of the difference in that Apple Cup game this past year? That nobody really wants to talk about. Wazoo controlled the trenches. Like, there was, when you look at which team won the O-line D-line battle, it wasn't close. And I think that, again, speaks to whatever that was on 4th and 2. But no, as much as I love Buda, Tariq, nickname Buda, that I would rather take David Gusta, just because you look at linebacker and think, okay, it's a little more passable there now. Yes, you have young bodies at all three positions, right? D-line, linebacker, safety. You have all those guys have veteran transfers with young bodies coming in. That said, what's the one position that we clearly know you cannot get away with playing a lot of young guys? D-line. Like, you can play some young guys. You can play an Elenius in a rotating role. You can play Omar Khan in the rotating role. But if you're talking about, competing heavily in the Big Ten and not just being 4 and 5 in conference, or, even potentially worse, you need to load up with as many big D tackles. And yes, Simone Pep is nice. Don't get me wrong. It's a good addition. But pairing another tree truck next to him, that to me, allows Ontario Thompson to go side to side, do whatever he needs to do, and kind of be a depth piece. Just all three max each other out.
And the other thing on top of that because you mentioned all the right things there, but it's also getting after the passer. That's really something you need, somebody who can collapse the pocket from the interior. And David Gusta can certainly do that. You mentioned Tariq as well, where that one we're watching very, very closely. Wouldn't be surprised if that's, of the guys that could jump in the boat, if that's the one who ends up doing it. Just we'll put that out there right now. The last one where there's going to be a spot open no matter what, where you find a way to make room, is if Takario Davis decides to transfer to Washington. that's a spot where there is a reserve scholarship. We haven't heard this for certain, but if you don't believe that there is a scholarship with Dakario Davis's name on it, just saying, hey, if you want this for your final season, it's ready for you, then I don't know what you're thinking, because that guy would come in and make a fantastic impact right away. Where do you necessarily need a cornerback? No, but do you take a guy who, is mulling being, in my opinion, a top 50 pick in the NFL draft right now, or coming back to school for his senior year? You take that every time. But Lars, speaking of just coaching staff, scholarships, recruiting, all that sort of stuff, we got to talk about the coaching situation for Washington. Right after a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. I love betting on which players will score a touchdown and how many points each team will score. It's thrilling. Not only can you bet on who will win the game, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points each team will score, and so much more. A couple of my favorites for Monday Night Football: Kendre Miller. I think he's going to get a lot of catches in this game. No Alvin Kamara. And the Saints quarterback situation is not fun. Check that out. Still got the Packers. I would bet them to cover the spread, whatever it is, how big. I've not been impressed with the Saints team this season. It has been just an absolute disaster. Do all that. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Matt Zenitz was the first to report it today. Pete Thamel confirmed, hey, yeah, it's widely expected. We can confirm that when Steve Belichick is done coaching the bowl game, when his buyout drops from $1.2 million to zero on January 1st, he will be heading to Chapel Hill. Not a surprise to anybody who not just listens to the program, just is involved anywhere in Husky land. You see it anywhere, you see it everywhere, but our guy Pete Thamel added a very interesting tidbit in there, very relieving one, I might say, for some Husky fans. Robert Bala, Vinnie Sunseri, who he just said no coaches are expected to leave, but we say those two names as they're the only ones with any sort of tie to Bill Belichick. So that's a fantastic sign for the future when we look at what those two position groups did this year, but also on the recruiting trail.
Yeah, that's massive. I mean, I don't know which one's more massive in terms of, Robert Bala with the linebackers, potential former DC that could become, the best in-house option, or Vinny, another young, coach's coach, coach's kid, football lifer. So that would have been, I think the Vinny one would have been way more hurtful, because you talk about Braden Womack in the 26th class. You talk about all these relationships that Vinny has done a great job on the recruiting trail. He's never going to be the biggest, personality in terms of, with the media and things like that. But I have seen Vinny come out of his shell. Ironically, when we were interviewing Jedd, there was a recruit that walked past behind Jedd, and I won't say, I don't think it was the same one that did the mag dump sound, but Vinny was going to walk behind him and was like, no, let me just go around here. But he cracked a smile and, was having fun with it. But again, it's one of those where it's like, early on, I was like, is Vinny going to be like, just a guy that just stays with Steve and then goes back to the NFL, or is he actually going to kind of carve out his own path? And I think, when you look at his brother Tino, where he starts at IU with Signetti and now goes to UCLA. It's like, oh, okay, could he have gone to UCLA? Well, UCLA hired there's an agent, Nicole Lynn. One of her family members, and so now he's the safeties coach at UCLA. And so you just look at some of these things, and it's like, ooh, it's almost kind of like good. Like everyone's kind of like, we talk about players all the time. Like, hey, it's okay to create your own path. You don't have to follow your same coach to the next two schools that he goes to, like Great Oswego or whatever. There's just certain guys in the football or basketball, whatever sport you want to say. That's the one that kind of reassures things for me, because I think Robert Bala was always going to stay, and he seemed like the best in-house DC candidate. So I wasn't too worried about him following Steve, because that didn't really make sense to me, especially probably knowing, let's be real, it's probably going to be Bill's defense down in Chapel Hill. But with Jedd, this can be your defense. And now with Vinny, it's like, hey, you're making roads in the NFL, or you're making roads in now college football. Try and stay at Washington for 2 or 3 years and just see, if you get an NFL job, so be it. But I think Vinny really is a solid college, kind of styled coach, really relates well to the players, great recruiter in that respect. I know it didn't seem like it, but, again, not getting Ladarian clarity and things like that, but still got Riley Donado, still got Donovan Robinson, still got all these guys. And I think it also kind of ties them together because Donovan Robinson being fought over by Bala and Vinnie. I think both those guys are kind of tied together more so than Steve and Vinnie were.
So I certainly agree with you where they're competing for, you know, in a sense, a lot of the same big athletic body types where the style of players they're bringing in are really interesting and a really fun hybrid role where, you know, something we talked about all season long was somebody in that Jabril Peppers role who can do a little bit of both, like he did at Michigan, like he's done for the Patriots, like he did for the Browns, the Giants, whatever else, where just somebody who can fill that role and play a little bit of both. And I think both these guys have done a really good job of finding players who can fit that mold because, you know, clearly that kind of style can thrive in the Big Ten. So I think that's really interesting, but we look at both those position groups and I think we saw them make major strides this season. I point at Alfonso Tuputala. You know, it's unfortunate. Obviously he's the one right now that's following Steve Belichick to Chapel Hill and Kamori House. You look at Carson Bruner, anybody who was playing linebacker this year, we saw them improve in a bunch of different ways throughout the season. And you could say the same at safety. And certainly a part of that goes to the scheme, but some of that comes from the coaching as well. And especially when I think about Alfonso Tuputala and all the different roles that he was used in, like we've talked about it many times on this podcast, we can see the exact same thing from Zaydas Rainey-Saleh. We think about, you know, Donovan Robinson, where everything that Kamori House was in terms of his speed, his athleticism, the way he was used, Donovan Robinson can do all those things. I'm not saying, you know, he's an upgrade by any stretch of the imagination because we saw Kamori do it, and we have yet to see Donovan Robinson do anything at the college level. But you look at that athleticism in that frame and what he did at high school, playing safety, playing linebacker, returning kicks, playing wide receiver, like all of those different things are really, really important. And just in terms of the projectability. So they have a really nice eye for talent, which is part of it. But again, once they get on campus, those guys improved. They showed significant improvement. And after watching the defense for the last couple of years really, really struggle, it's nice knowing that you have those coaches that you know can make sure that it's not just the older players, that it's the young guys, that you see that from day one, really, from those young guys as well.
Yeah, and that's why I'm really curious to know who is going to be the next DC. Is it Bala? Is it right. Then do you bring in a new linebackers coach? Because I think it's one thing to, you know, have the talent on the roster, but then that was kind of the magic of Steve Belichick was look at what Steve could do with the talent, you know. And clearly, I think, you know, the way that Jedd has structured this organization, call it school, program, franchise, whatever acronym you want to throw on it at this point, where you look at, you know, Matt Doherty, Jedd, all those guys, everybody kind of, they know what they want in terms of body types, talent, style, all those sorts of things, what scheme you want to run. And now it's almost like, do you get the coach to fit the players or the players to fit the coach? And I think it's the first one. I think it's the former. You already have the players. You just need the coach to kind of max out the players that you have on the roster, which makes it a very appealing DC job, whether it's Bala, whether it's somebody else, because I think, you know, and even if it's not Bala, I wouldn't be worried that, you know, let's say, hey, maybe it's another 1 or 2 year guy. And then Bala's like, okay, you know what? Now I feel like I can take the reins. But I would almost say just turn it over to Bala now because he's got the energy for it.
So here's a question I have for you on that front. Let's say Robert Bala does take the job. Do you hire a linebackers coach or do you leave Robert Bala as the linebackers coach and then, you know, say bring in an edge rushers coach or make Jason Kafusi a full-time edge coach and bring in somebody just to work with the interior guys? Like there are a whole bunch of different options that you could take. And personally, I'm in the mindset of if Robert Bala wants to stay on as the linebackers coach while also, you know, calling plays, doing whatever on the defensive side, bring in a guy just to work with the edge rushers. I think that that's a position where just the way this scheme, because, you know, assuming the hire is internal, just in this hypothetical world we're creating here, if Robert Bala is the defensive coordinator, the scheme is going to stay the same. The scheme is just going to be what's installed. So we're still going to see some of these not interior guys, these inside linebackers going out to the edge, doing some different things over there. And the edge rushers mold of players is going to stay the same. When I think of Isaiah Ward, when I think of Russell Davis, some of these pass rush specialist sort of guys. So why not bring in somebody else to work with them since you will now just still have a position open on the coaching staff and bring in somebody to work with those edge guys and let Jason Kafusi just focus on the interior.
Yeah, I that's an intriguing kind of way to think about it. I I mean, there's a certain linebacker that comes to mind when I think of, hey, you could just hire a linebackers coach and let Barlow be the DC. And I'm somebody where I'd rather have, the only position that it makes sense to divide it up is the secondary. If you go cornerbacks and safety, I think that has kind of been the only one that I've been okay. So yeah, you can have two there because again, it's two different sort of things. Where yes, along the interior, you're looking for something different from your tackles and your edges. But from a cohesion standpoint, I've always just kind of wondered if that's a little too clunky. Like, hey, I'm the D tackles coach and he's the D ends coach, and I'm like,
sure,
it's a great recruiting piece, but I'm not sure it's a great coaching and development piece.
I think that there are just some very important differences in the positions though, where you look at the interior, it's just so much. I don't want to say it's so much more physical, but it's just very different in the way you need to utilize your body and utilize the space that you have versus playing on the edge. And having coaches to focus on each of those subtle differences are things that could be really, really important in the long run, where it takes a whole lot off of Jason Kafusi's played as well, where all of a sudden, instead of saying, yeah, I need to worry about so many different things with so many different guys, it's let me focus on this position. I know I have somebody else who I trust that can focus on everything else, which is it's something to consider. And Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here, because we're going to talk about so much of that stuff in terms of coaching searches, whatever might happen on that front in the weeks to come right here on Locked On Huskies. And the best way for the everydayers to make sure they're up to date on everything just in the latest in Husky world, because there's going to be so much stuff going on in transfer portal news, the Sun Bowl, everything else. Make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating the channel with new content every single day. So make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you don't miss when we post a new video. And if you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Tuesday.